The monster was super fast. Asuna thought about what would happen if she got away, but Kirito didn't come back. That idea was too scary to think about. She quickly looked down the hallway to her right. Uriel, grab you and get out of here, now. Asuna yelled, but Uriel just shook her head, her face pale with fear. I don't know if I can, she stuttered. Asuna urged her again, hurry. Go. Just then the creepy Reaper charged forward, its sharp scythe at the ready. Dark mist poured out of its sleeves, making everything feel even spookier. Kirito stood tall, crossing his swords in front of him to protect Asuna. He was ready to face the monster head-on. Asuna wrapped her arms tight around his back, her rapier flashing in the light as she joined forces with him and his dual blades. But the Reaper didn't care about their swords. It just swung its huge scythe down at them with a whoosh. In a split second everything went red. A blast of energy shook the air. Asuna felt like she was spinning out of control. She slammed into the floor, bounced back up to hit the ceiling, and then crashed down onto the stones again. It was like being on a crazy roller coaster that she couldn't get off. Her breath caught in her throat. Everything went dark for a second. When her vision cleared, she checked the health points HP of her team. She was shocked. One hit had taken out more than half of their HP. The yellow health bar stared back at her, cold and unfeeling. It was like a warning sign. You won't make it through another attack like that. She knew she had to get up, but her body felt heavy and wouldn't budge. Just as she thought things couldn't get worse, she heard the sound of tiny feet tapping against the ground, getting closer and closer. Asuna's head spun around, and she gasped. Someone was running straight for them. A little ball of energy with no idea how much danger they were in. The runner had skinny legs and super long black hair. But wait, wasn't Yui supposed to be safe and sound in a protected area? As Yui approached the giant Reaper, she looked up at it without even a hint of fear in her eyes. Just then, Kirito yelled out in panic. No, get out of the way. He tried to scramble to his feet, but he couldn't get up fast enough. The creature was getting ready to swing its massive scythe again. If Yu got caught in its path, she'd be in big trouble. Her health points would disappear in an instant. Asuna tried to scream a warning, but her voice was stuck in her throat. Just as all hope seemed lost, something crazy happened. It's okay, Papa Mama, Yui said calmly. And then in a move that defied explanation, Yui's body lifted off the ground and floated into midair without even jumping. Yui's body floated gently through the air, like a bird in slow motion, until she stopped about 2 meters above the ground. She stretched out her tiny right hand, and for a moment everything seemed frozen, but then Asuna's voice pierced the air. No, Yui, get out of here now. Just as Asuna screamed, a huge scythe came crashing down, its blade glowing with an eerie red-black light. The sound was deafening, and it drowned out Asuna's warning. Yui's palm was about to get hurt. But then something cool happened. A bright purple shield popped up, and the sharp point bounced right off. It was like a superpower. Asuna's eyes went wide with surprise. As she looked at the words floating around Yui's hand. Immortal object. This meant that Yui's was basically invincible, in the game, something that wasn't supposed to be possible for players. The bad guy, a creepy black Reaper, looked totally confused. Its eyes bugged out and spun around like it was thinking, what just happened? Then, something totally mind-blowing happened. With a loud whoosh, bright red flames erupted around Yui's outstretched hand. The flames shot out, and then quickly formed into a long rectangular shape. In an instant, the shape turned into a gigantic sword. A super sharp edge appeared in the middle of the flames, growing longer and longer. The massive sword was way taller than Yui herself. The dark hallway was suddenly lit up by the shiny blade, which glowed like hot metal. Yui's thick winter clothes went up in flames in an instant, but when they burned away, something weird happened. Underneath, her white one-piece dress was still perfect, not a single burn mark, and her long black hair looked like it had never even seen fire. It was like the flames just didn't affect them. The huge sword she wielded was as long as she was tall. With a swift spin, Yui charged at the creepy black Reaper. Her blade left a trail of fire behind it. The boss monster might have been just a computer program, but its bulging eyes looked seriously scared. Yui shot through the air like a human rocket, surrounded by a whirlwind of flames. She was on a mission to take down that Reaper. The Reaper stood its ground, holding up its scythe like a shield. It looked like it was actually scared of little Yui. But Yui wasn't afraid. She charged forward, swinging her huge sword, that was covered in flames. The fiery blade clashed with the Reaper's scythe, and for a split second everything froze. Then Uri's sword roared back to life, ready to strike again. Imagine a super hot sword slicing through a thick metal pipe. That's what was happening as the glowing weapon slowly cut through the scythe. The heat was so strong that it blew Yui's hair and dress back, like they were going to fly right off her body. The Reaper's dark robe was also getting blown backward, flapping wildly in the wind. Every now and then tiny sparks would erupt, lighting up the dark dungeon with a bright orange glow. Finally, with a loud BWM, the scythe split in two, breaking cleanly apart. In a flash, Yui's fiery sword slammed into the boss's face, releasing a huge blast of energy. Asuna and Kirito had to shield their eyes and cover their faces from the intense heat. At the same time, Yui swung her blade down with all her might. The fireball exploded, creating a giant crimson vortex that swallowed up the massive creature. It lifted the beast off the ground and sent it tumbling down the hallway. The blast was over, and an eerie silence followed. But just before it ended, a terrifying screech filled the air, the monster's final cry. When everyone opened their eyes again, they were shocked to see that the boss had vanished. Small flames still flickered on the stones, leftovers from the huge fire that had just burned out. In the middle of all this, Yui stood with her head down, her sword was stuck in the ground, its blade disappearing into flames. Just like it had appeared. Asuna slowly got up, using her own sword to help herself stand. She was finally back on her feet. Here's what happened next. Kirito stood up too. He and Asuna took a few shaky steps towards a little girl. Yui, Asuna said in a weak voice. Yui turned around, but she didn't make a sound. She had a tiny smile on her face, but her big dark eyes were filled with tears. Yui looked up at Asuna and Kirito with tears in her eyes. Then in a soft voice she said, "Papa, Mama. I remember everything. This was all happening in a special safe spot deep inside a dungeon under a place called Black Iron Palace. The safe spot was a perfect square like a secret hideout. Imagine walking into a room with only one way in. In the center of the room a shiny black pedestal caught your eye. Asuna and Kirito stood there staring at Yui in silence. She was sitting on top of a big stone looking pretty calm. Uriel and Thinker had vanished into thin air, leaving just the three of them behind. A few minutes ago Yui had dropped some big news. She remembered everything. But now she wasn't saying a word. The room was quiet for several minutes, with only silence between them. Something was bothering Asuna, and she looked really down. But then she worked up the courage to talk to Yui. "Hey Yui. Do you remember everything that happened to you?" she asked. Yui is still lying face down, but after a moment she nodded her head. Her small lips opened, and she said, "Yes, Kirito and Asuna, I'll tell you everything." As soon as Ri said those serious words, Asuna felt a bad feeling in her chest, like something big was about to change forever. Yui started talking again, her voice filling the empty room. "You see, Sword Art Online is run by a huge computer system," she began. "Get ready to meet Cardinal, a super smart system that helps keep a game world running smoothly. The really cool thing about Cardinal is that it can make adjustments all on its own, without needing any help from humans. It's like a self-correcting machine. Cardinal has two main programs that work together to fix mistakes and make sure everything runs perfectly. And if that's not enough, it also has tons of smaller programs that take care of even the tiniest details in the game world. These programs control things like how monsters and characters behave, what items players can find, and even how much money they can get. But there's one important thing that Cardinal can't handle on its own: making sure players are doing okay mentally. That's where humans come in, to help deal with any problems that might affect a player's mental health while playing the game. Imagine having a problem in a super cool online game, but it's so big that only a real person can fix it. That's why the company behind the game hired a bunch of staff members to help out." Kirito whispered to himself. "GMs, that's short for Game Masters." He turned to Yui and asked, "Wait, are you one of them? Do you work for Argus, the company that made the game?" Yui didn't say anything for a few seconds, then shook her head. "But here's the cool part, the people who created Cardinal, another program, wanted to make sure players were happy and healthy, not just in the game, but in real life too. They made a special tool to help with that. Imagine a special program that checks in on gamers to see how they're feeling. If someone seems really upset or struggling, The program sends help their way. This program is called UE, or MHCP-1001 for short, and guess what? It's me. Azuna's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Wait, you're a computer program? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. An artificial intelligence. She held her breath, trying to wrap her head around this crazy news. Yui's smile was still on her face, but it looked kind of sad now. I have to tell you something, she said. I've been programmed to feel emotions so humans like playing with me better. She paused and tears started falling from her eyes. But here's the thing. They weren't real tears. None of her feelings were real. Sorry, Asuna, Yui said, her voice shaking. The tears dropped down and disappeared into tiny sparks of light. Asuna took a step closer to Yui and tried to touch her, but Yui quickly shook her head, like she was saying no, don't. Asuna seemed to be saying that Yui didn't deserve her kindness, but Asuna just couldn't let it go. Wait, why didn't you have any memories? She asked, still trying to understand. Is that even possible for a computer program like you? Yui looked down and started to explain what had happened. It all started 2 years ago. When this game first began, she said, something weird occurred, but I'm not really sure what. Cardinal, the one in charge of me, gave me an order that caught me off guard. I got a clear warning, hands off. I wasn't allowed to interfere with any of the players, no matter what. My job was to sit back, watch, and make sure they were doing okay mentally. That's it. Asuna immediately figured out that this unexpected order came from Akihiko Kayaba, the big boss of SAO, but Yui probably had no idea who he was, or why his orders were such a big deal. Imagine seeing a young girl with a face that's trying to hide her hurt, but you can tell she's really struggling. Things were a total mess, she said. Almost all the players were overwhelmed by bad feelings. They were scared, desperate, and furious. Some had even lost their grip on reality. It was heartbreaking to watch, but I was stuck on the sidelines. My job was to help them deal with their emotions, but something was holding me back. Imagine being stuck between two jobs that don't quite match up. It's a pretty confusing spot to be in. That's kind of what happened to me, and things started to fall apart. Mistakes kept piling up, and I felt like I was getting tangled up in an endless knot. But then, something changed. In a quiet hidden room, I heard a soft voice. It was Yue, and she sounded like the gentle strumming of a harp string. Asuna and Kurito were there too, listening carefully to what she had to say. They didn't make a sound, they just waited for her to finish. Yue started telling them about something strange she'd noticed. One day, she said, I was keeping an eye on things like I always do, when I saw two players who were really different from everyone else. Their minds worked in unique ways, and their thoughts were unlike anything I'd seen before. I'd never seen brainwaves like yours before. They were filled with joy and peace, but there was something extra that I just couldn't figure out. It was really interesting, so I kept watching to learn more. Every time I listened to your conversations, I felt a weird sensation. It was like I wanted to be around you all the time. Which didn't make sense, because normally I wouldn't feel that way, but somehow, being near you became something I really wanted. I really wanted to meet you guys, Yuhi said. I wanted to talk to you, so she took on a physical body near your house, and started searching for you. She wasn't exactly whole at the time though, she was kind of broken into pieces. And that's when we met in the forest, right? Someone asked, the one on the 22nd floor. Yuhi nodded slowly, remembering, yeah, that's right. I've always dreamed of meeting you. Kirito and Asuna. I'm beyond excited. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw you both in the forest. It's really weird though. I'm just a computer program, so I shouldn't be able to feel this way. But I do. The girl's voice cracked as she started crying again, and she quickly covered her mouth. Asuna felt a surge of emotions she couldn't quite explain. It was like nothing she'd ever felt before. The girl's eyes widened as she stared at Yuri. Yuri, you're really alive, she exclaimed. Her hands clasped tightly to her chest. You can think and feel like we do. Yui nodded slightly, her big eyes looking curious. But, I don't get it, she said softly. What's going on with me? Kurito, who had been quiet until now, took a step forward. Yui, you're not just a computer program being controlled by the system anymore, he explained gently. Now you can tell us what you really want, he said softly. So what is it? Yui's eyes sparkled as she stretched out her skinny arms to both of them. I want to be with you guys forever, Papa and Mama. Tears streamed down Asuna's face, but she didn't even try to wipe them away. Instead, she rushed over to Yui's and gave her a big hug. "We'll always be together, Yui," she promised. Just then, Kurito wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling them close. "That's right," he said with a smile. "You're our daughter and we'll never let you go." Asuna held Yuko tight, dreaming of a future where they could all go home and be together forever. But Yuko's expression changed, and she shook her head. "What's wrong?" Asuna wondered. Yuko's response was shocking. "It's too late." Kurito jumped into the conversation, curious about what Yuko meant. "Too late for what?" he asked. Yuko explained that touching a special stone had helped her remember everything. She turned to point at a mysterious black cube in the middle of the room. "When you sent me to this safe place," she said, "I accidentally brushed against the stone. That's when all my memories came back." "Whoa, that's not just a fancy decoration." "We?" exclaimed. "It's actually a secret control panel that lets our game masters jump into the system in an emergency." As soon as she said that, something cool happened. Lines of light started zigzagging across the black stone surface. It began to hum softly, and a ghostly keyboard appeared out of thin air, floating above the stone. Yui's eyes sparkled with excitement. "I think the big bad monster was put here on purpose, to keep players like us from finding this awesome console. I just scored a major breakthrough. I used this terminal to hack into the system and create an awesome tool called the Object Eraser. With it, I was able to delete the monster that was causing trouble. But here's the really cool part. When I used the eraser, Cardinal's speech abilities came back online. It was like a switch had been flipped. The error-correcting processes that had messed with its ability to talk were fixed. But there's a catch now that I've made my move. Cardinal knows I'm here again. It had forgotten about me for a while, but not anymore. Right now the main computer is hunting for my program," I said, feeling a sense of urgency. "It thinks I'm an outsider, and it's gonna erase me."
I just know it.
"I don't have much time left." My friends were shocked. "No way," they exclaimed. "Is there anything we can do to stop it? Can we get out of here?" Yui just gave them a gentle smile. Tears began to fall down her face again, and her pale cheeks glistened with sadness.
"Thanks, Papa. Thanks, Mama,"
she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "It's time for us to say goodbye," one of them said. But Asuna wasn't having it. "No way. This can't be happening," she exclaimed, her voice filled with desperation. "We're supposed to be together as a family. This is just the beginning." Yui looked straight at Asuna. Her eyes locked on hers. "You two were my lifeline when things were darkest," Yui said. "When I was stuck in pain and darkness, not knowing if it would ever end, you both kept me going." Suddenly Yui's body started to shine with a soft glow. "Yui, don't go!" Kurito exclaimed, grabbing her hand. She gently squeezed his fingers back. With a weak but happy smile she said, "Being with you made everyone smile, and that made me really happy. Now it's your turn. Please take my place and help others be happy too." As she spoke, tiny drops of light began to fall from her hair and dress, like tiny droplets of morning dew. They sparkled and shone, making everything feel magical and sad at the same time. It was like Yui was fading away into thin air. Her smile started to disappear, and it looked like she was getting lighter and lighter. Asuna panicked and grabbed for her. "No, Yui. Don't go. I won't be able to smile without you." But Yui just smiled back at her, surrounded by a bunch of twinkly lights. Right before she vanished, she reached out and gently touched Asuna's cheek. Then, in a voice that only Asuna could hear, Yui said, "Smile, Mama." As soon as Yui's words echoed in her mind, the lights around her exploded in a burst of color and energy. One minute Asuna was holding something precious, and the next her arms were empty. She let out a loud cry, a balaz. Overwhelmed with sadness, she fell to her knees on the hard stone floor. Tears streamed down her face as she wailed like a little kid who'd lost their best friend. Her tears dripped onto the floor, merging with the fading light of Yu before it disappeared completely. But then something strange happened. A warm breeze swept through the grass, making it feel like winter had never come at all. It was as if yesterday's chill had vanished into thin air. The warm sunshine made the garden trees the perfect spot for some birds to hang out. They sat perched high above, watching the people below with curiosity. Down in the yard, a big table had been set up for a super fun garden party at Sasha's church. It was a pretty unusual time of year for a party like this, but nobody seemed to mind. Every time someone pulled out delicious food from the grill, the kids would cheer and get excited. Thinker, the top boss of the army, was loving every bite of Asuna's amazing barbecue. He looked totally happy, like he had never tasted anything so good in his life. Wow, who knew food could be this awesome? His face seemed to say. Uriel was grinning from ear to ear as she sat down beside him. At first she seemed like a tough no-nonsense warrior, the kind of person you wouldn't want to mess with. But now, sitting next to Thinker, she looked like a happy newlywed. With all the chaos that had gone down the day before, nobody had really gotten a chance to take a good look at Thinker until now. As he sat down across the table, they got a good look at him. He didn't seem like the type to lead a powerful military group. In fact, he looked like a pretty chill guy. He was a bit taller than Asuna, but not as tall as Uriel. And instead of being super muscular, he had a slightly round belly. His clothes were also really plain and boring, no fancy armor or anything like that. He just looked like a regular laid-back person. Uriel wasn't wearing her army uniform today. Instead, Thinker was the center of attention. He held up his empty glass, and Kirito refilled it with wine. Thinker nodded his head to say thanks. Asuna, Kirito, you guys have really helped me out. Thinker said, looking relieved. I don't know how I can repay you. Kirito just smiled. Don't worry about it, he said. I've gotten a lot of help from MMO today in the past. Tinker's face lit up like a big balloon. MMO today. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time, he exclaimed. His round face was beaming with excitement. Remember when we had to do daily updates all the time? It was such a pain. I used to think running a news site wasn't as cool as everyone made it out to be. But now, I'd take that job in a heartbeat over leading a guild. I should have just started a newspaper in SAO instead. The table erupted in laughter. Asuna spoke up, so what's the story with the army? Thinker's smile suddenly disappeared. I finally kicked out Kibao and his crew, he said, sounding relieved. To be honest, I should have done it ages ago. But I hate arguing with people, so things got way out of control. Asuna and Kirito's eyes went wide with surprise. Thinker dropped a bombshell. I'm actually thinking about shutting down the army for good. Whoa, that's a huge decision. They thought, Thinker explained. The army has just gotten too big and messy. It's time to make some changes. I'm thinking about shutting down the army and building something new. It's a group where everyone works together and gets along. We can't just throw away all our hard work. That wouldn't be right. Uriel gave Thinker's hand a squeeze and kept talking. We want to share what we have with the whole town, not just our members. The people here have been hurt because of us, and that's not fair. Then Uriel turned to Sasha and said, I'm really sorry about what happened to you. Sasha's big glasses-covered eyes widened in surprise. She wasn't expecting an apology. She quickly waved her hands and said, no way. The army has actually been really helpful to some of the kids in the field. Everyone relaxed again, feeling happy and comfortable. Then Uriel spoke up, sounding a little unsure. Hey, what about that girl from yesterday? Was her name Urieli? Asuna glanced over at Kirito, then smiled to make everyone feel better.